Alright, so this lesson's on completing the square. It's a pretty straightforward process, but it does take a little focus here. So the first example they give you here is, the end process of completing the square. And anytime I want to solve an equation like this, first thing I have to do is get rid of the exponent 2. So to get rid of any exponent 2, the first thing I do is take the square root. And when I do that, I would get x minus 3, because the square root of x minus 3 all squared is x minus 3, equals plus or minus the square root of 5. Remember, when you solve these using the square root method, you're always going to get a plus or minus. Then next, you would go ahead and add 3 to both sides. So what happens here is we get 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. This is what we call the exact answer, but if we want to get the approximate answers, first thing we're going to do is 3 plus the square root of 5, and the second one would be 3 minus the square root of 5. So right here, 3 plus the square root of 5 would give you 5.2. Then the other solution would be 3 minus the square root of 5, which is going to give you 0.76. Okay, so again, these are what you call the exact answers. These are the approximate answers. Alright, so here, when we complete the square, one thing you have to know before we do this is, if I take this statement, 3 equals 3, if I do something to the other side, or one side, add 5, this is no longer true. But if I add it here, and I add it here, now it remains true. So that is a part of complete the square that you have to know. Alright, so right away when we also look at this, our goal is to make it a perfect square trinomial, meaning I can basically go ahead and write it as a binomial square. So what we do here is we're going to basically go x squared minus 6x. We're going to add something in here, and whatever we add to this side, we're going to go ahead and add to the other side. Now, when I get this, right, to find the number I'm going to add, I'm going to take half of negative 6, and I'm going to square it. That would give me negative 3 squared, which is positive 9. If I add 9 here, I'm going to add 9 here. Now what you have to understand is the reason we added 9 here is because now we can factor this. If you think about it, what numbers multiply to give you 9 and add up to negative 6? That would be negative 3 and negative 3, right? So we would get this, but this can be rewritten as x minus 3 all squared. So now we would get x minus 3 all squared equals 5 plus 9 is 14. Okay, so now the process I can go from here is take the square root of both sides. X minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 14. Then x is equal to 3. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, plus or minus the square root of 14. And you would be done. So again, the reason we add this 9 here is so that we can write it as a binomial squared. Okay? The next one, complete the square to solve this one. The first thing I look for when I go to complete the square, is there a GCF here? And there is a GCF, so we're going to go 3 times, divide each of these by 3, and I get x squared minus 2x, right, equals 21. Now what I'm going to do is divide this side by 3, and now I'm left with x squared minus 2x equals 7. So now I'm going to go ahead and complete this square here. Okay, so I'm going to go x squared minus 2x. I'm going to add something here equals, right, 7. And then I'm going to add the same thing to this side. So how do I figure out what I add? When I look at this, I'm going to take half of 2 and square it, which gives me negative 1 squared, which is 1. If I add 1 here, I'm going to add 1 here. So now this, you have to understand, becomes what multiplies to give you 1 or adds up to -2. This right here is what it'll be. You know it's going to be x minus 1 all squared equals 7 plus 1 is 8. Now I can go ahead, take the square root of both sides. X minus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 8. I'm going to add 1, and x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 8. Now I could break this down into, simplified radical form, which would be 1 plus or minus. This breaks up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which would be 2 root 2. Or you can take it down to the decimal. 1 plus the square root of 8, 1 minus the square root of 8. So this would give you 1 plus the square root of 8 is 3.8. That would be one solution. And 1 minus the square root of 8 would be negative 1.8. And those would be your two solutions. Okay. So if we look at this example, right, we have x squared minus 6x. What are we going to add here, right? And we're going to add that same amount here. So to figure this out, I take -6 divided by 2 and square it. That will give me -3 squared, which is 9. So I add 9 there, I add 9 here. And remember, this is just going to become x, and then what did you get here? -3, so -3 all squared equals 12 plus 9 is 21. Now, get rid of the exponent 2 by square rooting. So x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 21. And then I'm going to go ahead, add the 3. So I get 3 plus or minus the square root of 21. Now I can take that down to a decimal if I want, but not 100% necessary. Alright, so here I'm going to factor out the 2 first. So 2 times x squared, if I divide these each by 2, that gives me x squared minus 12x, right, equals -20. So the first thing I'm going to do here is divide both sides by 2 to get rid of that GCF, so I'm left with x squared minus 12x equals -10. Now I can go ahead and complete the square. X squared minus 12x plus, what am I going to add here? I'm going to take -12 divided by 2, square it. It's going to give me -6 squared, which is 36. If I add 36 to this side, I'm going to go ahead and add 36 to this side. Now this, again, right, if I look here, this is going to be a key number because now this factors out to be x minus 6, right? That minus 6 is this minus 6 all squared equals 26. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 26. Now I can go ahead, add 6 to both sides, and I end up with x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 26. Again, you should be able to take this down to a decimal by doing 6 plus the square root of 26 and then 6 minus the square root of 26. I would know how to get the exact form, and so 6 plus the square root of 26 will give you 11.1, and 6 minus the square root of 26 gives you 0.9. Alright, so for this one, complete the square to rewrite this in vertex form. Now this is a little different, right? So right now what I'm going to do is, the one thing you have to know going into this is, if I look at this, if I add, say, 2 to this side, to keep this the same, I could also add it, then subtract it. So when I go to write it in vertex form, right, when I do y equals x squared plus 4x, I'm going to add something here, but then because I'm writing it in vertex form, I'm going to subtract it right away, but then I still have the plus 1. So x squared is here, right? 4x is here. Your 1 is here. But now, to figure out what I add in here, I'm going to take half of 4 and square it. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. If I add it on this side, I'm going to subtract it from the same side. Now, these three terms turns into, right, x plus 2 all squared. Because what number is multiplied to give me 4, add up to 4, that's 2 and 2, so it's x plus 2 all squared. And now, negative 4 plus 1 is minus 3. And we are done. Alright. So the function net y equals negative 5x squared minus 20x can be written in vertex form as negative 5 times x plus 2 all squared minus 3. The function opens up or down, and the vertex is a min or a max. So, in this case, if you have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So these numbers are the numbers in front. If a is positive, your graph is going to open up like this. So when I look at a, which is this number, or even this number, right, that tells me if it opens up like that, or if a is negative, it would open down, right, like that. Well, here's the thing. If it opens up, your vertex here is a minimum. If it opens down, your vertex is a maximum. So in this case, the function is going to open down, and if it opens down, my vertex is a maximum, and we always take the opposite of the inside, right? So my vertex will always be at the opposite of the number inside, which we call h, comma, k. So if this is 2, the x-coordinate of the vertex is negative 2, and this would be negative 3. So the next one says, complete the square to find the zeros. These are your x-intercepts. And if we're looking for our x-intercepts, we know the value of y is always equal to 0. So we're basically taking x squared plus 12x minus 5, and we're replacing y with 0. Now, to make this easier, what I can do is add 5 to both sides, and I would get x squared plus 12x, and now I'm going to complete this square by adding something, and then adding something. So, 12 divided by 2 all squared is going to give me 36. I'm going to add 36 here. So, right away you would get x plus 6 all squared equals 41. Take the square root. X plus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 41. Subtract 6. X equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 41. So, one of your zeros would be at negative 6 plus the square root of 41, comma 0. And the other one would be negative 6 minus the square root of 41, comma 0. Okay, so those are just your x-intercepts. So number 9, a penguin starts to slide 3 feet above the water. He slides down and glides underwater. The function is this shown, where h is his height above or below the water in feet. Next is a horizontal distance. Complete the square to find the extreme values. So what we're looking for are the zeros here. So when I look here, so whenever they talk about extreme values, alright, so you have this penguin, he starts to slide, and then he goes underwater here, right? Anytime they talk about extreme values, right, they're talking about a minimum or a maximum, right? And both of these are the vertex, alright? So when we look at this, if the vertex is here, is that vertex the highest or lowest part of the parabola? It ends up being the lowest part, so it's a minimum. So they want you to find the minimum of this value. So how do we do this, right? So when we look here, right, we're going to take this function, y equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. And we're going to complete the square on it to put it in that vertex form. Now remember, and I'm going to reiterate this, vertex form is a times x minus h all squared plus k, where a determines if it opens up or down, right? Opens up or down. And the vertex, right, in a math text, they'll say hk, but we think the opposite of hk. Meaning, if I give you the function y equals x minus 2 all squared plus 3, my vertex would be at the opposite of negative 2 is 2, 3. Okay, if I gave you another one, x plus 4 all squared plus 3, right, my vertex would be at the opposite of positive 4 is negative 4, 3. So you only change the sign on the inside of the parentheses. So here, we're going to group these two terms, basically, and we're going to complete this square. X squared minus 4x, we're going to add something, and then right away, what we add, we are going to subtract. And then I have my plus 3. So now, what do I add here? Well, negative 4 divided by 2, all squared, is going to give me positive 4. So I add 4 here, which means I subtract 4 here. And now, what multiplies to give you 4 and add up to negative 4? That would be negative 2 and negative 2. So it's x minus 2 all squared. Negative 4 plus 3 is minus 1. So right away we know this is, since our a value is positive 1, we know it opens up. And our minimum, right, is going to be at the vertex. And the vertex is the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. My y-coordinate is going to be negative 1. So now if we go back up here and we see the minimum is at 2, negative 1. Right? What that means is at 2 feet out, right? 2 feet out, the penguin was 1 foot under water. Okay, because he was, if this is your height, right? If at this point he was 1 foot underwater. Okay? Alright, number 10. The profit for a taco truck business follows this function, where X is the price of a taco in dollars and Y is the daily profit. So if we talk about this graph, right, we have X is the price in taco and Y is the profit. Alright. Now, they do say this is in hundreds of dollars, right? So, right away it says find and interpret the zeros of the functions. So to find the zeros of the function, right, I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So we're going to have negative 2 times x minus 2 all squared plus 4 equals 0. I'm going to first subtract 4. So I get negative 2 times x minus 2 all squared equals negative 4. Then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. And I get x minus 2 all squared equals positive 2. Well, now I'm going to square root both sides and I get x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. I'll go ahead and I'll add 2 to both sides and I get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. So what this means is if we take each of these solutions, 2 plus the square root of 2, and the other one is 2 minus the square root of 2, right? 2 plus the square root of 2, 2 plus the square root of 2 is $3 or 3.41, and the other one would be 2 minus the square root of 2, which is 0.41. 6.59, sorry. So right away when I look at this, what does this answer really mean? Well, what the 0 ends up being, right, the x-intercept means you have 3.41 comma 0, right, and the other one would be 0.59 comma 0. So if we have to interpret this, right, if the price, right, remember all of our ordered pairs are price, comma, profit. If the price is $3.41, your profit equals $0. And if the price is 59 cents, right, the profit is $0. Right? What does this really mean? At 59 cents, right, if you're selling the tacos for 59 cents, you're not making any money because that's probably what it cost you to make it. If you charge $3.41, they're predicting you will not sell any tacos, therefore your profit will be $0. Alright, so know what your ordered pairs are and know how to represent them. So, real quick here, when we complete the square for two reasons. One, to solve the quadratic equations, and the other is to put it in vertex form. Know how to do each of them, and if you need another video, let me know.